Hi, everyone. I'm Rob Koplowitz, and we're here with another episode of The Lowdown by Analysis.Tech. I'm here with my often co-host, John Rymer. How are you, John?
Very good, Rob. Really excited about this episode.
Yeah, this is going to be a really good one. And for the listeners who've been kind of listening in, or those who want to go catch up on things, the topic today is going to be design. And we've done this a few times, and I think it's just been interesting in the sense that we've been doing this now for oh gosh, about a year and a half, I think we've been into this, or is it 2.5 years?
And they still let us do it.
Well, it can't stop us. There's no barrier to entry here. So, so we get to keep doing it. But we started off in one of the really early episodes with a friend of all the folks who are on with us today, Andrew Hogan from Figma. And, we had a really good conversation about design about midway through. So go catch Andrew Hogan of Figma, if you want to go back and catch one of the back episodes. And then really one of our most popular podcasts was Laura Rodriguez, who was with design at IBM at the time. She's now with Reuters. And there was a lot of significant change. And today we're going to advance the conversation, and I think in some really interesting ways. So we bring really truly an old friend, probably more so a friend than a colleague. But we all work together at Forrester. We're here today with TJ Keitt. TJ Keitt has for a while now been been a VP in various roles at SAP. Currently holding the role of VP of Market Research, but with a focus um, on design. And I think it's really significant in the sense that there's a lot of talk going on about what the heck's going on in the industry and what is the future of applications, what is the future of SaaS. But the truth of the matter is, more companies run on SAP and will continue to run on SAP for the foreseeable future, as close to forever as we're going to get. And so SAP weighing in, a representative of SAP weighing in on this is I think a really big moment to consider in terms of design. So anyway, TJ, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, John, over to you.
So, TJ, I'll add my welcome. It's great to see you, and thanks for joining us. We'd like to start our episodes by asking our guests to tell us about their journeys. So, how did you arrive at your present position, TJ? And maybe tell us something that a lot of people don't know about you that is interesting.
Oh, let's see. Well, as I am often asked this question by university students, the answer I usually give is that I'm at my current position because I was never hesitant to stick my head into a door that opened up in front of me and take a look around. So I, went from being a new product development consultant at a small consultancy in Eastern Massachusetts to working at Forrester, to now being at SAP, because when an opportunity presented itself that looked interesting, I took a look in. So circa 2021, I got a phone call from an SAP recruiter asking to have a conversation with the chief design officer at the time about coming over and taking a look at things related to the end-to-end experience. I had been working at Forrester at that point on a number of topics related to B2B customer experience, and was interested in making a transition. And so I accepted the offer. And since being at SAP, one of the things that's interesting about being at a company that is, maybe an order of magnitude larger than a place like Forrester is that there are lots of things that are going on at all times, and there's always an opportunity to look at something new and different. So, as things have kind of progressed over the past almost 5 years now, I've had opportunities to kind of go from things like looking just explicitly at end-to-end experience topics to now looking more explicitly at what we're referring to as experience analytics, how it is that our user experience positions us in the marketplace, how our product improvements affect things like our ability to retain customers, and how, excuse me, ultimately how all of that, then leads us in a position to properly differentiate in a increasingly crowded marketplace, seeking to do many of the things that SAP has done, by right and by heritage, over the past 53 years.
Wow. Thank you. Awesome.
Mhm.
All right. So TJ, we've already kind of talked about SAP. SAP probably has as good a claim to anybody at running the world's business as probably better than anybody. I'd say, knowing you for a while, I would say two things about you that are true. I doubt you'll push back on these. Is you're very analytical and you're very pragmatic. But there is this new world emerging, right? And
Mhm.
you've been in design for a long, long time, right? So you've been looking at this space and these opportunities for a long, long time. Where are you excited about how the user experience is going to change, how business is going to change? And where can we start to think about some of those third rails that people are talking? Because a lot of stuff I see on LinkedIn around how business will be run is not very smart, and it's not very informed. So
Yeah.
what are the opportunities? What should people be looking out for in terms of too much hype in the market today?
Yeah. So I guess if we take one big step back, because I think this is ultimately becomes a question of what is exciting about design in this period. So if we think about design, kind of as a overarching topic, at its very basic level, design is about intention. You are intentionally building something. You're putting particular steps into place. You're putting particular fits and finishes on the interface. You're creating specific workflows and things of that nature. Well, if you hold that idea in mind, that that's what design is, it's about intention, and you compare that to what's been happening in the market over the past, let's say, 18 months, you could argue that there hasn't been a lot of design put into the evolution of this. So if you go by, say, MIT's numbers, 95% of businesses that experimented with artificial intelligence last year saw no business impact from it. If you're looking at Gartner's perspective on this, about half of the pilots were abandoned last year because people were not able to figure out what to do with it. And that's just on the business side. You go over to the user side, well, we haven't convinced very many people, let's put it that way, that this is going to be good for them. So if you look at the Pew polling on this, you're seeing about half of workers and American workers indicating that they are worried about what AI will do in their jobs. And if you go to the UCO poll that came out very recently, you're seeing about 63% of American workers indicating that that they are worried that they're about job destruction, as a consequence of artificial intelligence. So if we kind of take it from that perspective, we have not designed these systems to this point to deliver value to businesses that they can kind of get their arms around in any sort of measurable way. And we have not instilled confidence in the workforce that this is going to be a net benefit to them as opposed to a net detraction from their ability to do the very fundamental thing of collecting a paycheck to feed their families. So from an opportunity perspective, I think there's a great opportunity to do both of those things, to think systematically about what exactly it is that artificial intelligence improves in business processes and user workflows, as well as shaping up a narrative for the workforce that says, this is not something that necessarily will hurt you. This is something that can improve your ability to do your job in very practical, pragmatic ways. And so if you look at where we netted out on that, you just go back to this previous week. We had Sapphire, and we unveiled the idea of the autonomous enterprise, in which the idea is not that we're using artificial intelligence to take away the agency of a worker. Instead, we see kind of the future of AI, particularly when it comes to how people interact with applications, as being a system that allows for people to orchestrate and conduct the activities of various agents working against backend applications, allowing for those individuals to more easily, more effectively, I didn't say efficiently, but effectively
Mm-hmm.
do the jobs that they've been asked to do. And so I think, from where we sit, that's a great opportunity. And you layer on top of the fact that, SAP historically, has, as you noted, this deep reservoir of data that it's working with from transactions across a range of business processes. Plus, kind of our heritage as a company in Europe that is always thinking about the things that people worry about as it relates to privacy, as it relates to data governance and security. You put those things together, you marry it to this idea that we're talking specifically about not just the fanciness and the interesting parts of artificial intelligence, but the pragmatic, like this is how it fits into your business process, and then speaking directly to the end user and saying, this is how it can potentially help you be a director and orchestrator of agents as opposed to a passerby, as these things do your job for you. That I think we have some great opportunities here.
So as I said, analytical. So you definitely proved my point on analytical. I love your comment about efficiency versus effectiveness. This is something
Yep.
we press on a lot, and we're going to revisit that, I think, a little bit after the break, because it's really an important concept for people to understand at this point. John, over to you.
I want to follow up on that, TJ. You said something. I mean, it's fascinating to me that, as you cited, there are these polls that show that so many people are afraid that AI is going to eliminate their work and eliminate their job. And how do they survive? So there's that. You have college students booing, a speaker at a commencement when the speaker mentions AI. So you have that going on. But on the other hand, you have massive usage of ChatGPT and Copilot and um, other manifestations of generative AI that are widely available. Do you so there's a contradiction there, because there's a lot of usage, but then there's a lot of fear. Do you think that part of this is people do not see AI expanding their agency? I love that word. They think that it's going to be done to them, rather than here's tools to help you further our mission,
Right.
in new and better ways.
I mean, I think you're right, John, that I think a lot of the concern is about what is being done to people as opposed to what's being done with people. Um, so this was under a conversation, at least kind of as I've heard it in the market, between those that are interested in selling AI to businesses and the end user. This was a conversation about the end user with people in leadership position, people in buying decision chairs. You marry that with the idea that people have eyes. They go out and they look and they say, this company is laying off, you know, 5% of their workforce. This company is laying off, 5,000 workers. You go and you doom scroll through places like LinkedIn, and people then become, kind of enamored of the idea that, hey, this isn't a benefit for me. Like, sure, I may use this in my personal life in very specific and oftentimes like very trivial ways.
Right.
So I use it to help me plan out my vacation to Italy, or I use it as a way of doing some tracking of some of my health stats. Um,
Mhm.
but now we're talking about. I heard this guy over at this company say that they envision the death of white collar work. Kind of in the next 18 months. All right, well, that's a very hopeful message. For
Right.
people, who are kind of at the end of the day, the individuals who are going to have to use these systems, because, regardless of how much, stuff that we're seeing in the press about, various enthusiast for artificial intelligence talking about kind of the wholesale destruction of lots and lots of white collar jobs in the very near future. That's going to be a very difficult thing to get to for some very practical reasons, such as the quality of data that companies currently have. Or just, kind of, what we were just talking about before, the fact that a lot of these pilots have not worked out in that way.
Right.
So if these are the conditions that we currently have, and the messaging seems to be that this is about the destruction of those jobs, and these conversations are happening over the heads of those end
Yeah.
users, then yeah, like there's no feeling of agency in this. I am just waiting around for the company to slash my position because of AI. Now, whether or not that's true, because there is a lot of AI washing of a lot of this restructuring activity is another story. But this is what people hear, and it's only natural that you're going to see the fear and perhaps the things that we would cite as being contradictory in terms of behavior of individuals versus their perspectives on what's going to happen professionally for them.
Right. Awesome. Thank you, Rob.
Hey, folks, if you really like what you're hearing here, please hit the like button, hit the share button, get the word out to like-minded folks. Share this if you could. I think TJ always has really, really great insights. And again, I said analytical and pragmatic, right? So I think those are things that are probably should be very highly valued in the current landscape. If you want to find out more about us, visit us at analysis.tech. Couldn't be simpler. And get access to all the folks that are here. Guys, we normally go after the break and continue the Q&A, but given that fact that we all go back about, I don't know, 15 years, is it at least something like that?
Probably
I mean,
more.
you were a young guy. They used to call them that young guy, TJ. You're not that young anymore. We go back a ways.
Yeah.
So I think we've all had a lot of candid conversations about this, not on podcasts. So let's kind of throw some things around. We talked about efficiency. We talked about effectiveness. We talked about changing, business processes. But what about these guys that there's a land grab going on right now for a bunch of people that can make a lot of money. And they've got a lot of wind behind their sails. They've got a lot of government support. They've got a lot of fear. If they're not successful then we are not successful. Are the interests of these guys and gals out there in line with what, I don't know, SAP has always done for their customers? Right? Are we talking about the same things, or are they just out there to make money and garner power? How's that for a grenade on the table? Maybe we'll see if Peter Thiel wants to come on next week, chat with us. Not to name names. Not that there's any theys out there.
I will not comment specifically on any particular individual. I will say this. I will say that the profit motive and the kind of the ability to deliver or the desire to deliver specific things are not necessarily opposed ideas. I think the thing that I would always kind of come back to in these conversations is what SAP has done historically, and what SAP intends to continue to do, as far as I understand it, is run businesses. That's a really hard thing to do, right? Because you have to build a lot of engines to run businesses. You have to build engines to run the human capital part of it. You have to build an engine to run the finance part, the supply chain part, the accounts payable part, and so on and so forth. Those are hard to do things that you build over long periods of time, right? And that's what SAP has done, whether it's going back to legacy ECC, now into the S/4HANA suite, SuccessFactors, Ariba, Fieldglass, and so on and so forth. I don't think if we're speaking specifically about like kind of the range of um, AI companies that have caught the imagination, that they are proposing to replace any of what SAP has built in that fashion. And it would be, in many ways, I don't think it would be, practical because of what we just talked about in terms of like there's a years long legacy kind of associated with a lot of these things. So where does that lead kind of the conversation? That leads the conversation on two layers of the stack, so to speak. There's the interface. How do you interface with these applications, part of it? So the human to machine interaction, there's opportunity for that to change. And so that's where, we at SAP have seen the opportunity to launch something like Joule Work, which is what we see as our engagement layer to our systems. And so that becomes kind of this generative user interface that's composable, it's built on intent, so that what the person is trying to do is what manifests on their screen. Below that, then, are the army of agents that talk to the assistant. So that's the second place, where, there's kind of this whatever competition you want to have, can take place. And who builds these agents? How do we monitor these agents? How do we control these agents? Becomes kind of like the sticky bit, that we're all going to have to figure out in time. Because those are the things ultimately that run around and talk to all of these underlying applications and begin to piece together the hard thing, which is business processes that move across different applications. Um, and so being able to dig into that, extract the information necessary to complete specific business processes at that interaction layer so that someone can monitor what's going on underneath becomes another interesting area. Now, the argument that people will make is that, well, you can parcel out those top two layers, right? Like you can get one AI company to help you build all the agents. You can get another AI company to help you with the kind of that engagement layer over the top. But then you're gonna run into some of these kind of these core issues in terms of integration. You're gonna run into some issues in terms of like how well those agents understand what's going on in the underlying systems and so on. And so, I think the way that we've positioned it, particularly at Sapphire and coming out of Sapphire, is that we are kind of helping build those layers of the autonomous enterprise, so that an individual can orchestrate from that engagement layer the activities of these agents touching these back-end applications. And because a lot of your business process already flows through SAP, it creates continuity, in terms of how all these things kind of work together. Sure. So I guess to your question, Rob, like, yes, I guess there are people that, that are going to want to compete, with SAP in some form or fashion, most likely on those, top two layers, because it's going to be really difficult to say vibe code your way to an ERP system. That then kind of opens the door for, that sort of conversation. But, I think we've put some pretty strong ideas out into the market in terms of like how we want to address this. And we'll see kind of what tweaks need to be made going forward to ensure that people are getting the value out of these systems that they require.
Hey, John, let me throw this to you. All right. You and I were there when they invented the telegraphs, right? And we were there for the telephone and, the electric typewriter and on and on. I mean, joking aside, we've been through a number of tectonic shifts in technology. Does this feel the same or different? Is it just the same hype cycle that we've always gone through, or is something different going on here?
Oh, I think it feels the same. But as is always the case, Rob, when we go through a hype cycle, it's hard for us in the early stages of and hype cycle makes it sound like it's just a flash in the pan. It isn't. There is abiding value that this new technology can add if we're smart about it. What's always difficult though is the new technology comes along and we overlay it on the old patterns. So, one of the comments I love is, "Oh, great, we got vibe coding now. We're just going to build the same old crap. Uh, we're just going to vibe code it instead of writing code or using low code." So, I think, I think the pain comes in when you are the pain can come in when you are blindsided by new ideas. Maybe a competitor does something way better than you've been doing it, or maybe as one of the vibe coding stars found out recently, security is really hard, um, and that kind of thing. The other thing, though, Rob, that I think there is a through line through all of the changes that we've been through, you and I have been through as geezers. And that through line, I think, is maybe call it empowerment. So TJ, when you're describing SAP's view of where software is going and where running businesses is going, I think implied in what you're saying is a lot more empowerment of individuals than certainly has been the case in SAP's world, because that's the core data. You can't be sloppy with how you manage it, and you got to be really careful about how it is accessed, and how it is secured, and how it is evolved over time. So what I'm hearing is that SAP's thinking much more aggressively about how to empower people through the underlying agent layer, and even how they see things, how they express their intent of what they're trying to do. Am I
Yep.
hearing that right?
I mean, I think you're on the right track. I mean, I think what we're putting out into the marketplace is a vision for how these systems can be empowering and increasing the agency of the worker, as opposed to being something that is, removing, their ability to take action. Um, as trite as it sounds, we do believe in things like human in the loop, right? We do believe that, that the person, that human judgment, is still going to be a critical part of how businesses are run. Thus, what we're trying to do is create systems that improve the inputs to that judgment and then allow for people to take action, based on what it is that they understand, from their various systems. So, yeah, I mean, I think we're saying that. I think, kind of the questions that will come, from that will be, how best to put this in front of people, how
Right.
best to get them thinking differently. Because, again, even if you're thinking about, how we talk about an engagement layer, that's we are proposing that people no longer interact with their underlying, business applications. We're saying, you don't necessarily have to go into, S/4HANA to look at finance issues. You're going to become an expert in prompts as opposed to clicks. You're going to, have more conversational interactions with these systems as opposed to user inter or GUI, graphical user interface. So it's a conversation or interactions with these systems. And so, yeah, I mean, I think there is at once, kind of this idea that we are, trying to increase agency. We're trying to increase the abilities of people to take action. But we also have to acknowledge that there is a learning curve for all this. Because if I go back to something that you mentioned earlier, yeah, there are a lot of people using ChatGPT, but there are what, 8 billion people on the planet. The majority of those people have not used something like ChatGPT. So there's
Right.
still a lot of people to kind of bring along in this conversation. There's still a lot of work to be done to retrain the world. And let's be honest about kind of the timeline that we've been on here. That this has been roughly kind of like an 18-month scale. people talk a lot about like, well, this is like the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution happened over the course of 100 years. We're talking about 18 months here. So people have to be shown that while this feels scary, there is hope, for them in this. People have to be shown, kind of like what the new patterns are. They have to be shown what the new ways of working are. And they have to be shown that those are beneficial to them. Because at the very core of a very old model, the technology acceptance model, is this idea that the thing that you want people to accept is at once useful and easy to use. So it's the useful part, that we're working on, as well as making sure that the thing is easy for people to use.
Gives them agency. By the way, you don't have to tell us about the Industrial Revolution. We were there. We were there back in the day.
I remember going out and breaking those cotton gins. I wasn't going to let that happen in my town. Hey, TJ, it's always great to catch up. Such great insights. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today and to share your thoughts with our audience.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
All right,
TJ.
folks. Thanks again for listening to another episode of The Lowdown by Analysis.Tech.